Hello there. Welcome to the second episode in the series titled Introduction to Computers. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at the three basic operations of the computer. In the first episode, we looked at the main parts of the computer, and we were also able to define a computer, and we defined a computer as an electronic device that operates under the control of instructions stored in its own memory in order for the computer to allow for input and to process the data as well as to produce information. We were also able to identify the main parts of the computer as the keyboard, the mouse, the monitor, as well as the system unit. In this lesson, in this today's episode, we are going to be looking at the three basic operations of the computer. The three basic operations of the computer are mainly the input, the second one is the processing, and the third is the output. Okay, so the term input is basically defined as the entering of data and instructions into the computer. The entering of data and instructions into the computer. So basically this is a process that we take whenever we are using a computer. There are several times that we actually enter data into the computer in order for the computer to use that data for its intended purpose. We also enter various instructions into the computer whenever we actually using or operating a computer. We are always giving the computer instructions on what to do at a particular time. Okay, so this data which is entered is data that is raw. Okay, we actually term this data to be unprocessed, which means that at that point it actually has no meaning, and it may not be as useful to us as raw as it is. So the reason why we actually enter it into the computer is so that the computer can be able to get that data, use it, and then produce something useful to us and something meaningful to us. Okay, several times that in my lessons I have asked students to say, do you eat Mili Meal? And confidently a number of students answer yes to this question. They answer yes, that they actually eat Mili Meal, and they begin to doubt when I ask them, are you sure? The reason is very simple. They begin to wonder, is it actually Mili Meal that we eat, or maybe it is Nshima, or maybe porridge? So actually the Mili Meal in itself is raw because it has not yet been cooked. So that Mili Meal is going to be used to prepare a meal that is going to be meaningful and useful to us because we're able to eat a cooked meal. So the Mili Meal in itself, I don't think I would actually get Mili Meal and start eating it as raw as it is. But then when it is processed, when it is cooked, then something meaningful is produced, and that is Nshima. Now we would in this scenario say that probably the Mili Meal is the data, the raw facts, the raw items that are used to actually produce something meaningful and something useful. Okay, now when that raw data has been processed, actually what is produced at the end of the day is termed as information. So the information is meaningful to us and it is useful to us, and we term it as processed facts, whereas the data has no meaning, so we term it as unprocessed. Let's take, for instance, we can give another example. We could have different numbers. For example, I can give you a lot of numbers, digits, maybe 5, maybe 10 digits, and those digits, if I just give them to you at random, you would probably not know what those numbers are actually meant for. But if we are able to get those numbers and arrange them in a particular order, then those numbers could actually have a meaning. Maybe those numbers could actually mean an account number for the bank, or it could be a contact number, a phone number. It could be maybe an amount of money or anything. But of course, it has to be arranged or processed in a certain manner which is going to give us meaning, and it is going to be useful to us. Provided it is in a way that has no meaning to us and not useful, then we cannot term it as information. So in short, we have been able to differentiate between data and information, and we are saying that data, these are the raw facts that are unprocessed and have no meaning. And then information, these are processed facts which have meaning and are useful to us. Okay, so now the aspect of input, we have said that input, this is the entering of data and instructions into the computer. So what we enter are the raw facts, okay, and of course the instructions. Now when we enter those, okay, that process itself is the first basic operation of the computer, okay. Then from there, once those instructions and once the data has been entered, it moves to the second basic operation of the computer, which is processing. Okay, processing, as we have briefly described, is the aspect of arranging or adding or multiplying or any work that is going to be done on the data that has been entered in order to convert that data into useful information. That is what we term as processing. Okay, so there will be an aspect of that data which has been entered to be processed so that meaningful information can be produced. Okay, after which, when the data has been processed, then this data has to be given out as output. Of course, when we enter that data and it is processed and then information is produced, that information is actually supposed to be meant for us to use because it is meaningful to us and it is useful to us. There is no use of information being produced and then it is kept in the computer. So actually, after the information has been produced, that information has to be given back to us for us to use because it is now useful to us. So the aspect of that information being given out to us is known as output, which is the third basic operation of the computer. So the computer is going to get that information and give it to us in one way or the other. Now, in order for these three basic operations to be possible, there are a number of different hardware components that actually assist us in order for this to be made possible. One of the hardware components that are responsible for input, that is the entering of data and instructions into the computer, is a keyboard. A keyboard is termed as an input device because it is a device that is used to enter data and instructions into the computer. Aside from the keyboard, there are several other devices which could be categorized as input devices. These include the mouse. The mouse is also an input device because this mouse is also used to enter data and instructions into the computer. Another example of an input device we could talk about is a scanner. Okay, a scanner is a type of device that is going to collect data from the outside and take it into the computer for the computer to be able to process. Another example we could give is of a microphone. A microphone also collects data, and that data is entered into the computer in order for that data to be processed. Not that the microphone actually is unique in the sense that it actually enters data in form of sound, unlike the keyboard, which enters data in form of text, that is numbers and letters. The microphone enters data in form of sound, which tells us that data can actually be in different forms. Okay, so data can be in form of text, which is a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols. Okay, data can be in form of video. Okay, which brings an aspect of a camera being an input device. Okay, so a camera is also an input device which allows us to enter data in form of video. Okay, the microphone enters data in form of sound, so that's another type of another form of data, that is sound. Then also we have some graphics and animations. All those are different forms of data. Okay, then when all these examples I've given are used to actually enter the data we have said that that data needs to be processed. Now, in order for processing to be done, there are some components that are also responsible for this task. Okay, of course, it is clear that the main component that is responsible for processing of data is simply the processor, which is referred to as the system unit. I think we briefly talked about the system unit in the previous episode. The system unit, is also referred to as the CPU, because inside the system unit we have a CPU, which is the central processing unit, which is a chip found inside the system unit. That chip is actually the one that is referred to as the brain of the computer, because it is the one that does the actual processing of data. Now, this CPU, the central processing unit, is a component that has parts such as the control unit. The control unit is a part that does the control aspect of processing. It is the one that creates schedules for all hardware devices connected to the computer. It is the one that controls the input and output systems, that is controlling how data is entered into the computer and how data is given out from the computer. It also controls the data that is coming in from maybe the storage to the processor, in order for that data to be processed, and how after the processing, how the information can be moved out from the CPU. Okay, then another part of the CPU is the ALU, which stands for arithmetic logic unit. The arithmetic logic unit is the part that does the actual processing, because this one performs arithmetic operations. Arithmetic operations are basically calculations or computations such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. All these are arithmetic operations. It also performs logical operations, which involve an aspect of reasoning by comparing different aspects to make some informed decision. Okay, so it performs arithmetic operations, and it also performs logical operations. Thus, it is referred to as the arithmetic logic unit, the ALU. Okay, so we have talked about two parts of the CPU. One, the CU, which is the control unit that controls the operations of the CPU. Then we have the arithmetic logic unit, which does the actual processing, that is performing arithmetic as well as performing logical operations. Aside from the CPU and these two parts that we have talked about, we also have the memory, which is the RAM, that is also responsible for processing of data, because this RAM is the one that actually holds the data that is to be processed. Okay, for example, when you enter anything into the computer, okay, you have not actually saved it. For example, if you were maybe on your phone typing a phone number which you wanted to call, and maybe your battery was on 1 or 0, if your device, your phone goes off, you would actually lose that number that you were entering there, provided you did not actually save it. The reason is very simple. At that particular time, that number is stored in the RAM, which is the memory. Okay, you cannot see anything on your computer or on your device minus it being stored somewhere. So initially it is stored on the memory, and then this memory is volatile memory, meaning that it is a type of memory that keeps data for only a short period of time, that is during the time that the machine is using it, and during the time that the machine is on. Once the machine is turned off, everything that is in the RAM is removed. Okay, so this memory is actually just there to hold this data while the CPU is using that data to process it. So the memory is actually a vital part of the processing of data. Minus the memory, then the computer would not be able to function. Okay, I would give an example of, for example, if you have an office, and then you have this cabinet where you keep your files. Okay, that cabinet, it doesn't mean that actually those files in your cabinet, you would actually use those files from the cabinet. What it means is that whenever you want to use any file from there, you would actually get that file out from the cabinet and probably put it on your table or desk. That is where you are going to use those files from. Once you are done, you can get those files and put them back. So similar, when there is anything that is stored on your computer, it will not actually be used from the storage where it is kept. Whenever you open anything on your computer, it is actually moved from the storage into the RAM, where it is going to be kept during the processing time. Okay, aside from that, we have now the aspect of output. Okay, so when the information has been produced after processing, then it is supposed to be given out to us in one way or the other. Okay, there are different output devices. These include the monitor, which is the screen. Of course, whenever we are using a computer, we normally see these things that we are doing through the screen, which is the first example I could give of an output device. Of course, there are several others. We have output devices such as a projector. We have output devices such as a speaker, which is an output device that gives out information in the form of sound. We have a number of other output devices that we could talk about, such as a plotter cutter, which is used to cut graphic objects or graphic materials. We can also talk about a printer. Okay, a printer is another output device which gives out information by way of bringing it out on paper, and then we'll be able to get that information by seeing or reading it from the paper. Okay, so those are the three basic operations and the devices that are responsible for allowing us to achieve these operations. Okay, now take note that after this information has actually been produced, you could choose to store it. At this point, this information is not stored, so you could actually choose to store this information for future use. In that case, the aspect of storage comes in, which is the keeping of data and instructions for future use. Remember, I gave an example of a cabinet. We don't use files or information from there, we actually retrieve them, but if we wish to use that information at a later stage, you would actually get that information, put it in the cabinet. In this case, we're keeping information in storage, and we have said that storage, this is the keeping of data, instructions, and information for future use. Okay, an example of a storage device includes the hard disk drive, which is abbreviated as HDD. The hard disk drive is the main storage of the computer, and whatever we store on the computer is actually stored on the hard disk. But of course, we have other storage devices such as the flash disk, which is a very common storage device. We have a memory card. We have floppy disk, which is at this point no longer in use because of these advanced technologies. And we have also tapes, which also, I think by now, I don't know if there are people who are still using tapes, but also tapes are storage devices. So those are some of the storage devices that are available to use to store data, instructions, and information for future use. Okay, so that was our lesson for this episode. In this episode, we were looking at the three basic operations of the computer, of course adding a fourth operation, which is storage, and these four operations actually encompass what we term as the data processing cycle. Okay, so in the next episode, we are going to be looking at the advantages and the disadvantages of using computers. Of course, there are a lot of advantages as well as disadvantages, which we are going to be looking at in the next episode, which is going to wrap up our introduction to computers series, and then we are going to have our question and answer session. Thank you so much for following these lessons, and ensure that you comment by putting a question in the comments below, and like the video, like the page, subscribe to the YouTube channel, as well as ensure that you invite others to benefit from this program. Remember to put your questions in the comment section below, and look out for the next episode. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have a lovely day.